y'all. Welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. So this week we're digging into interview prep from the hiring manager perspective. All right, so I know this is going to be a little maybe unusual for this channel. We definitely focus heavily on job seeker content, helping job seekers and candidates do better in their job search, knowing the right questions to ask, all those kinds of things. But interview prep is very, very important. I talked a lot about it last week. I refreshed the interview FAQs on the website, recruitinginyogapants.com. Hit the templates and FAQs drop down and you'll see all of the FAQs available to you, including interview FAQs. But I want to take it another step further. And while this may be more beneficial to recruiters watching, or maybe the occasional hiring manager who might stumble across these videos, I think there's some goodness here for job seekers too, because I think if you have a better understanding of how these processes work, you're better able to prepare for it or decide if you want to take that interview at all. Just saying, because you know what? Interviewing is a two-way street. Yes, that's right. Job seekers are interviewing us as much as we are interviewing them. And that is another hill I will die on. And I will go down fighting, y'all. Not taking me out that easy. All right, so let's dig in. What is good interview prep from a hiring manager perspective? So there are two key things that I want to talk through. One is the pre-interview setup or discussion, or kind of how we're preparing for the interview. And then the second is going to be the post-interview discussion. So now that we've gathered all the data, what are we doing with it? So one feeds into the other, both super important. Okay, I'm going to link to last week's video up above. I will include the FAQs down in the video description, so check those out if you have not already. Let's dig in, shall we? So how do we start this process? How do we get our hiring managers on board? I will tell you, friends, this is no joke. As I've been kind of thinking about this and talking about it with some other colleagues, I gotta tell you, I'm pretty spoiled, because I will say this is something that big tech usually, my experience, does pretty well. There are usually some pretty standard processes or ways of structuring an interview that makes this kind of preparation almost second nature. Like this is just a given. We just do this, right? And I definitely use that information to help develop my interview prep for candidates, because I want them to understand what they're getting into potentially. And I just think it's a good practice. I really do. So I hope that any of my recruiter friends watching, please think about how you can enable this in your own organizations, if not already. So what does that prep look like? So ideally, this starts when we open the role. We shouldn't wait. Oh, hey, we're interviewing Joe next week. We better figure out what we're going to ask him. No. You are defining that when the role is created. So when you're writing those responsibilities, when you're negotiating those basic qualifications, God knows I am constantly like, well, maybe we'll just move this one down here, and maybe we'll just take that one out. I want to make it really, truly minimal. But as you're having those conversations, you should also be thinking about, if this is what we know is important, how are we structuring the interview to make sure we get that data? So your hiring manager hopefully will be willing to do this either on their own or with you in partnership with their recruiter, to make note of the most critical functional and role-related knowledge. So what are the specific skills? What are the specific things that this applicant needs to know? What do they need to be able to walk us through? What do they need to be able to demonstrate through interview data that they are capable of delivering or have delivered in the past? You know, I'm a big fan of behavioral based questions. I like to talk about here's what I actually did and why it makes me great. That's my favorite way to interview, me personally. I know not everybody loves it. Sorry, guys. So your hiring manager should be able to articulate that. Now we're going to take that a step further and we're going to establish who are the interview participants. We know, okay, this is I'll use I think we talked about like a engineering manager last week, right? Was kind of our pretend candidate. So let's use that same analogy, okay? So this person is going to be a people leader. So we definitely want to get some good leadership data points there. This person's still going to be pretty hands-on, might be writing some code, maybe 20% of the time. So maybe a live, whiteboard exercise is probably appropriate here. Maybe they're going to like spearhead an entire project. Maybe they need a little like PM, hustle, right? They're not a program manager necessarily. They may work with some PMs, but maybe they need to kind of have some of that ability, right? Am I going too far? I might be going too far. But my point in that is we want to identify those key skills. These are the things I need to make sure my new hire is able to deliver. And we are going to assign those concepts to different interviewers. And we're probably going to also use it to identify the right interviewers. You're not going to have a junior, brand new engineer interview for a leadership questions. That's not going to work. That person would not know necessarily what good would look like. So making sure that you're identifying the key role-related knowledge, you're identifying the right interviewers, so people who know their stuff and can ask the right questions and can drive the right conversations, hopefully gone through some interview training, things like that. And then also making sure that everyone involved in the interview understands the assignment. Get them together in a room. Talk through it over a video call. Like we do that a lot. In my last 4 companies, actually, we would do that. We would actually set up meetings ahead of time. And sometimes we do it over email. If we've done this same interview multiple times, we'll just, send an email as a refresher. But we get real clear on what we need to know and what does good look like. And everyone has their marching orders. They know this is when I need to go and figure out. This is what I need to learn. These are the questions I need to ask. This is the data I need to collect. I'm going to bring that back to part 2, the post-interview discussion. This is also very important. This is where we've now gone out and gathered all that great data. We're going to bring it back and discuss it. So what does that look like? This is where having that initial structure is really, really important. We now go back and say, okay, we all met with Bob, the engineering manager. And as a reminder, here are the things that were really important. We needed to make sure that Bob knows how to code. We needed to make sure that Bob has, strong PM skills. We need to make sure that Bob's still pretty hands-on himself. Like Bob's a good leader, whatever. So we agreed. These are the things that are important for this role. Now, what did we learn? And so that discussion happens and we talk through the lens of this is what we need in this role. This is the problem we're trying to solve. Did we get the data to prove that Bob can do it? Okay. So having that follow-up discussion and making sure that we are tying everything we learned back to the requirements of the job helps us make a fair hiring decision. Because what we don't want to do is go into that discussion and be like, well, Bob actually shit the bed in 3 out of 4 categories, but you know what? Bob went to Stanford. You know who else went to Stanford? Everybody in the room. So we're going to go ahead and hire Bob. No, you're not, first of all. Okay. And the reason why you're not is because we establish criteria in the pre-interview meeting And Bob did not meet that criteria. So sadly, Bob will not get an offer in spite of being your fraternity bro. Just saying. Not that that ever happens in tech, right? That's not a thing, is it? Okay. So, recruiter friends, I hope that this has given you a couple things to think about. I highly, highly, highly recommend a pre and post interview meeting with your entire interview panel. This is also data that you can use to help prepare your candidates, right? And so as a job seeker, as a candidate, those are the questions you can ask. What are the things I'm going to be asked about? Are there certain role related, you know, subjects that I should kind of refresh my memory on? Whatever. Check out the interview FAQs. Good stuff in there. Some questions that you can ask your recruiter. But try this. If you're not already doing something like this, try to put some of these guardrails in place. It really does help us make a very data-driven and as fair as possible decision, because we're not changing midstream. We're not getting halfway through the interview and going, yeah, Bob sucks at this, but you know what? He's a hell of a golfer. So let's just talk about golf and we'll hire him based on his ability to, whatever you do in golf. I don't know. I'm not a golfer. All right, y'all. I hope that helps. Let me know down below if this has given you any food for thought, if you have any questions about what we've discussed today, and if you need help driving these conversations with your leaders, you know where to find me, amy@recruitingandyogamats.com. Drop a comment. I read them all, and we will see you next week.